Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about the different types of writing portfolios that there are, really focusing more on the types of composition portfolios, that is like rhetoric and composition, first-year writing classes, things like that, more than something like a creative writing portfolio, though a lot of what we'll talk about in this video is still applicable even for things like creative writing portfolios, teaching portfolios, professional portfolios, things like that. As always, I'm going to be drawing on a combination of my own experience, having taught in a couple of different portfolio-based teaching systems, and Nadra Reynolds and Rich Rice's book, Portfolio Teaching. So when we think about different types of portfolios, there's a couple of major categories. One is a learning portfolio or a process-based portfolio, and the other is a product portfolio. That's a bad term for it necessarily, because often when we talk about product-based courses in rhetoric and composition, we're talking about, I'm grading this individual essay as a product. And that's really not what portfolios are about. Maybe provisionally we could maybe call them evaluated portfolios, although that really isn't quite right either, because that puts the emphasis on grading or assessment or something like this. Reynolds and Rice call it best works portfolios, but I actually think that's a bit limited, because for me, this category has a couple of different options as well, one of which is a pure best works portfolio, the other of which it isn't really a best works necessarily, in the sense that this is the most exemplary, most accomplished writing that I've ever done. So let's first talk about learning portfolios. For the most part, a learning portfolio or a process portfolio is generally going to be something that's kept for the writer themselves. This is something that you keep to chart your own development, your own writing process, your own improvement over the course of time, etc., etc. So the goal here is really about reflecting for yourself on what you have done with your writing process, how it's improved, how you've made advancements, what sort of challenges you've faced, what sorts of challenges you've overcome, etc., etc. So reflection is obviously a really, really big part of a learning portfolio or a process-based portfolio, because you're taking specific artifacts, specific essays or pieces of writing or whatever it is, and you're putting them in relation to one another to demonstrate something about how you as a writer have improved, or whatever it is, whatever your particular purpose with this learning portfolio is. So again, because that goal is to sort of organize this material in such a way that it shows something about your writing process over time, reflection is super, super important here, because that's where you make sense of what these pieces of writing demonstrate. When Reynolds and Rice talk about, I don't know why I keep wanting to say his last name is Rich, but it's Rice. His first name is Rich. There we go. So when Reynolds and Rice talk about learning portfolios, they talk about them almost exclusively in terms of, this is something that I'm keeping for myself to chart for myself my writing progress and how I've improved over time. Actually, there is another version of a learning portfolio or a process portfolio, which is the learning portfolio for assessment. I've taught in a program where that was really the emphasis. At the University of Vermont, when I was a master's student there, in our introductory writing class, one of the things that we looked at with portfolios was, have you demonstrated growth as a writer over the course of this semester? And actually, that was a thing that we assessed on. So, I mean, you could, I said this to students in the classes, if you can come in writing at an A level and write at an A level throughout the semester, but if you don't show growth, if you don't show improvement based on what we learn in this course, you can still get a B in this class. Whereas the student who comes in maybe writing at a low C level, but ends up writing maybe at a low B level, that student might actually earn an A in the course, because one of the things that we're trying to figure out is, have you improved? Have you become a stronger writer based on going through the process of this course? So there is an approach to a learning portfolio in which that process of learning, that process of developing as a writer, can be part of what's demonstrated by the portfolio itself. So those are the two, I think, sort of big elements of a learning portfolio or a process portfolio. Is the one that's oriented for yourself. This is charting for me so that I become more aware of my own writing process, or an external learning portfolio that's meant to demonstrate to an instructor or an assessor or whatever it is that I have gained knowledge over the course of this semester or year or whatever it is. The other broad category of portfolios is, again, what Reynolds and Rice call best works portfolios. I'm not super happy with that categorization, but I don't necessarily have a better one. But I would say that there are sort of pure best works portfolios where you select the strongest pieces of writing that you have ever done, or the strongest pieces of writing you've done in a particular class, whatever the context is, and those demonstrate your greatest strengths. So if you're thinking about, so like an artist's portfolio, for instance, if you are in the visual arts and you're putting together a portfolio of your work, you're going to choose your best paintings, your best photographs, whatever it happens to be, the things that are the strongest. And you're going to put those into your portfolio because the objective of that portfolio is likely to demonstrate how good you are at the art that you produce. So that's what I'd call a pure best works portfolio. On the other hand, there's another type of product-oriented portfolio. I guess product-oriented is the term that I would use, where the portfolio itself becomes a product that's being assessed externally in some way, whether that's for a class, whether that's for a job application, whether that's a teaching portfolio for a teaching job, promotion, tenure, whatever it is. The other major type of product-based portfolio, I would say, is a skills demonstrating portfolio. So that would be a portfolio that shows a wide variety of different artifacts, different types of texts that you would produce, in the humanities sense of texts as anything that can be read. So this could be, I want to demonstrate that I can write a research-based essay, and that I can write a good email, and that I can write a podcast, or whatever it is. So a skills demonstrating portfolio would be focused on giving a wide range of different types of documents that demonstrate a range of skills that you have. So the best works portfolio, the focus here again is, this is the strongest stuff that I have. This is the level I'm capable of working at. The skills-based portfolio is about variation, variety. This is the range of skills, the range of writing tasks I'm capable of completing. So, how do you start figuring out how to approach these different types of portfolios? We've got a couple of approaches to learning portfolios, a couple of approaches to product-based or product-oriented portfolios. How do you start even thinking about this? Well, one thing is you want to think rhetorically. So hopefully, if you're in a writing class, you will have learned some of the basic components of rhetoric, ethos, pathos, and logos particularly. A portfolio is really driven by ethos and logos in two different ways. So the ethos component of portfolio design relates to your self-presentation. What type of story is this portfolio telling about you? And so that's where reflection becomes really, really important. What does this collection of documents say about you? In a best works portfolio, this reflection should be talking about your strengths, the strengths that these works demonstrate. In a skills-based portfolio, it may be talking about all of the different abilities that are in these documents. In a learning portfolio or process portfolio, you want to show, here's how I have grown. Here's the story that you, the reader, should be getting. So that's something you always want to be thinking about. And as we know, whenever you tell a story, whenever you make an argument using narrative as a rhetorical method of development, you need to provide evidence to support that. So, the story that you are telling is structured through the reflective components, and then the documents that are included, the artifacts that are included, that's your evidence that the story you're telling about what this portfolio demonstrates about you is accurate. So you want to be thinking about, what story am I telling? How am I presenting myself through this portfolio? And what evidence do I need to incorporate in order to prove that my story is correct? Which documents, which artifacts do I need to include in order to show that I have learned to do these different types of writing tasks, that I have overcome these particular types of challenges, whatever it is? The other major thing you need to be thinking about, depending on your particular purpose, audience, context in which you're putting together this portfolio, etc., is arrangement. Now, again, this is a very, very, very central component of rhetoric. The way that we organize our arguments, what we sometimes call argumentation, or the structure of an argument, is incredibly important for how that document makes meaning. And again, a portfolio is a rhetorical document. It is meant to show the reader or viewer something about you as a writer. So, what order are you putting things into this portfolio? Typically, you'll want some sort of introductory component, but where do you put reflective components? How many reflective components do you include? Maybe this is a portfolio that doesn't lean that heavily on reflection, and you just have sort of a cover page or title page that gives readers a sense of what they're going to find here. And then the documents, the artifacts, stand largely on their own. Or maybe this is a really, really reflective portfolio where before or after each artifact you have a brief discussion of what that artifact signifies about your writing process or writing experience or writing abilities. What's the order of documents, or the order of artifacts? Which things come first, which things come later, and how do they relate to one another? Because that's one of the important things that you want to be thinking about. What's the relationship between these documents, and how does the order of these artifacts fit into and reflect the story that I'm telling about myself as a writer. Arrangement is somewhat more challenging, actually, with e-portfolios because they allow readers to navigate much more easily in a non-linear fashion. So when you're thinking about arrangement and you're thinking about getting a portfolio to tell a story effectively, you do, when you're dealing with an e-portfolio or an electronic portfolio, you want to be thinking about, how can I create a structure that lets readers navigate intelligently, that lets them navigate to the particular places that I really want them to see in order to get the story that I'm telling? So that's a very important, but sometimes very complicated thing to do. In terms of figuring out which artifacts to select, which artifacts to include, and then how to arrange them, Reynolds and Rice have a nice little bullet-pointed list here, things that you can think about to determine which pieces should be included and what order they should be included in, and how you're going to establish connections between the various artifacts. So the things they suggest to do: review the collection. So you'd be looking at everything that you have written for this class, or whatever it is, whatever the full range of your artifacts is, your teaching career, your artistic career, whatever it is. Review the collection, categorize the artifacts. So what are the different types of documents that you have? What categories can you put them into? Sometimes this will make more sense than others. Maybe for a first-year composition course or something like this, you break it up between full-length essays, you have short writes, you have proposals, you have peer review work, etc., etc. That may be the way that you break it up. So you categorize them. Analyze trends or patterns. So what are the connections, and what do the different pieces you have show? Consider navigational schemes or themes. So again, you're thinking about, what do I want this portfolio to say about me? Do I want it to say, this is a person capable of consistently producing excellent work? Do I want to say, this is a person who has a wide range of abilities? Do I want to say, this is a person who started not especially as a strong writer, but is now much stronger? Whatever it is. What do you want this portfolio to say? And how do you organize the evidence for that story? Weigh all the options and compare storyboards and plans. I think it's always a really good idea to develop multiple potential outlines for something, whether that's a portfolio, whether that's an individual essay, whatever it is. Think about multiple ways of organizing that information and determine which one is the strongest. Surf the web for models. Sure. It's always really useful when you're doing a writing task, especially for the first time, to look at different models of how other people have approached that task. Whether that involves looking online, whether that involves your instructor giving you sample portfolios, whatever it is. If you can find models, that's really good, because other people will do things that you might not have thought about doing. So that's great. And then create new artifacts. This one is primarily going to relate really to reflective components and to structuring documents. So give us information that connects the different pieces in the correct order. What do we as readers need to know to understand the story that your portfolio is telling us? So that's ultimately what you're thinking about when we're looking at different types of portfolios and how to put together the information for them.